Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raegan Gibbings, and on behalf of the UWI Socialist Student Conference, I will be presenting on the misconceptions of GATE. So there are many notable erroneous beliefs, ideas, notions, misconceptions that are currently and commonly held amongst the student demographic, parents, lecturers, and policy makers, government officials, and many more surrounding the issue of the reforms made to the Government Assistance for Tuition Expenses program. Conversation were at the forefront, and it has settled on the hearts of students and a lot of persons who say that GATE is a privilege. They say education is a luxury. Students are wasting GATE, and GATE is draining the economy. These are just a few of many of the misconceptions and notions that have surfaced, stifling and threatening the life and continuation of the GATE program and the potential it has to sustain and develop a nation. It is essential to first understand the fundamental role of GATE in context and relevance to higher education. When we think of the misconceptions surrounding GATE, we need to ask ourselves questions in relation to higher education. What does it mean to be educated? What does your degree mean to you? Is it just a meal entry ticket into Babylon? Do we understand the importance of an educated society? Therein, this leads us to understand why GATE is necessary and why the continuation of it is essential. GATE stands as a fundamental right and not a privilege. It is not a luxury. It promotes individual freedom and empowerment. It speaks to the holistic development of you and I, and it fosters high educative values that trains us to understand society as a collective, thus giving us the power to progress, positively modify, and change the course and outcomes of societal ills. With higher education being freely accessible for all, it enhances an individual's ability to make informed decisions and be more self-efficient stewards within society. It builds a populace of creative and critical thinkers, innovators, and entrepreneurs. We need to adapt these thoughts at inception when we understand our role as students, say at the university. An educated society equates to a progressive society. Therefore, the government has a responsibility to facilitate this means of development. Without access to higher education, individuals cannot be effective citizens. GATE protects this vision and purpose. It is not a privilege, but an ideal expressed in policy. It is no secret that our education system here in Trinidad and Tobago is completely flawed. The system is designed to reinforce social and class divisions. It perpetuates the gaps and divides that exist within contemporary society between different groups. A degree we are taught to value as a status symbol as opposed compared to the indicator of someone's true knowledge and skill. Cuts in tuition fees not only serve to keep the privileged members of society at the top, but it also excludes the masses, persons who are unable to afford tuition, and it leaves them meters behind in this race. The barrier to entry created by fees and other costs will prevent many from ever reaching high levels of attainment. This is of mass concern, and this speaks to an equitable issue. When we understand this picture, it obliterates the notion that GATE is draining the economy. We cannot continue to see education as means of opening pockets as opposed to opening one's mind. Knowledge ought not to be seen as a commodity. In an economic crisis, a government's first recourse shouldn't be to challenge, question, or seek to implement cuts to the development, in this context, education, of which can stagnate and hinder a nation's growth. A question of a threat to economic sustainability is a question to the evils of corruption, the evils to the lack of accountability and mismanagement of funds. The Band-Aid approach, instead of dealing with the root cause of economic crisis, has led to the reintroduction of tuition fees. Also, the false idea that free tuition will potentially limit the scope of work and flood the labor market, making it difficult for one to get a job, is as a result of a dearth in diversity. We have been conditioned to aspire for mainstream careers, and our economy does not facilitate creative initiatives? Do we teach students to start their own business and become self-sufficient? Do we deem certain degrees inferior as opposed to others because it does not fit the image of an ideal career? Are we teaching students to step outside the box and invent new technologies and models that can quell economic and social injustices? This train of thought requires students to be prepared with skills of knowledge and confidence to be global citizens and affect change. Diverse thought materializes into a diverse economy. One of the misconceptions that has been brought to the forefront is that students are wasting gates. These are the cries of many who see that evidently students are unappreciative of the funds that are being allocated towards the completion of their degree. While this is an issue that I seek to address and encourage students to redefine their take on learning, this is also an institutional and administrative issue. Stipulations are already in place to ensure that the program is not being abused. Stated on its website are the clear instructions that your application must be approved by clearance in order to access funding. The objective behind the clearance policy is to reduce the detected abuses to the GATE program, namely students dropping out of the programs without valid reasons, students repeatedly starting and dropping out of different programs, students switching programs without prior approval or notification, students repeating the same programs at the tertiary level institutions. With evident breaches to said policy, this is a question of accountability and a question of efficiency on management of funds on the tertiary institution's part and not the students. With all of the upheavals and concerns surrounding the issue of tuition reformation, a call for personal introspection, student-to-student reasoning, and educational reform is vital. Students need to make a similar commitment to be enlivened by the thought of learning. What makes education valuable? The efforts put into it by students for the purpose of holistic attainment and not only material accesses or gains. Understanding that one's role as a student is not consumer status and that your degree is more than a byproduct changes one's entire outlook on what it means to be educated. When this outlook is re-envisioned, perspectives on why higher education is fundamental begins to fall into context, highlighting the urgent need for economic reform. This is our society, and all of these are the different sectors of development that embody us as a society. When we continue to take and cut from each sector of development to uphold a system that evidently and obviously is an expression of inequality that obviously and evidently affects the masses, that obviously and evidently stagnates production within an economy, it brings to the forefront issues of crime, poverty, gender-based violence, and all of these things we need to take into consideration. When we are looking for educational reform, we also need to allude to social reform. Thank you very much.